Good morning, class. Welcome to Fitness Program Management's Staff Selection and Development. This PowerPoint that I'm bringing you today is by Dr. Doyle of the Kinesiology and Health Department at Georgia State University. So today we are going to start by talking about the staff development for basically commercial gyms, and a lot of these are average numbers, of course, from IRSA that we usually get data from. As you can see, this is kind of a typical average sheet, just showing you a breakdown of what a full-time staff would look like in terms of, for example, 10 FTEs, how many members are assigned per employee, and then as you read along, how many employees per manager, and how much turnover they have. What's interesting is you can see the next line item below with part-time employees. As there are a greater number of employees that are part-time, the turnover rate is 30%, so about double the amount. You get a little bit more loyalty and long-standing with your full-time employees, obviously. First step with the hiring process is called preliminary personnel considerations. Now, this basically goes from a process of steps of task analysis, job qualifications, decision-making procedures, salary ranges, job description, growth opportunities, job audit, reporting relationships, exemption status, and finally benefits. So as you can see, there is a large amount of considerations that first happen at the HR status before bringing on anybody. And this again applies not only to full-time and part-time staff, but you're talking about contractors, interns, and anything else that you can think of additionally when bringing on people to a company. So we'll start with task analysis. What does that mean? Basically, finding out what the interview process is. If you recall back at one of the previous PowerPoints when we talked about resume building and job interviewing, this is it. This is basically trying to talk about objectives and goals with your staff and what is expected, and this is where the department manual would be looking at the handbook for employees and just going over if the employee matches the criteria for the job and vice versa. With the qualifications, these are good kind of examples, fill in the blank of basically, as we always talk about with communication, how important it is to go over qualifications. And you can see, again, there are definite objectives that are required, and again, the expectations are needed from day one, and this way it's just crystal clear, and it's, again, fair across the board that everybody knows what is communicated and what is expected on both ends. Continuing on with job qualifications, we've talked a lot about the tangibles, but what we haven't talked about too much in full depth, and what you'll never see, in training modules, is your what's called intangible characteristics. The whole debate of is this innate or is this environmental? Can you train people to have these types of attitudes and skills and such, or is this something that someone's just born with naturally, and maybe they'll develop over time? Other items of qualifications, obviously, as we've stressed from day one, my number one most important priority, of course, being educational background. I always stress that and can, again, just always emphatically say that should be at the top of a resume. That should be highlighted from the employee or whoever's, wanting to get the job, is to bring up their education credentials, and then everything else follows suit, whether it's the certifications, experience, and such. But again, I can't stress enough, the education is right at the top there, and again, the intangible characteristics, putting on a smile, asking good questions, good quality. We've talked a lot extensively about how an employer will probably make the first decision in his or her head in the first 20 seconds of looking at the candidate, how they're dressed, did they show up on time, etc. Areas of training and education. This is a long, big slide here with many different items and categories that an employee can expect to work in the health and fitness field. So straight out of the ACSM textbook that we're going over too, you can see there's so many items to look at of what do we want to be, again, when we are graduated from Georgia State University and start our career, basically. This is the bridge, and a lot of you are doing that with your internships. Through the classes we've already had, we've talked extensively about situational assignments and case studies and different types of real-world scenarios. And I encourage you to really spend a lot of time on the different opportunities that you have, because I strongly believe in kinesiology and health. You have so much opportunity at your fingertips, and I encourage you to just take a look and see what speaks most to you. And as I've told you before, personally, I like both personal training and, of course, teaching. So if you feel that any of these speak to you, that you feel that, again, something is that you're passionate of, I would strongly urge for you to follow that and turn that into your possible journey and career path. Professional certifications. We've talked a lot about how our book is the ACSM textbook that we go on, so Georgia State University uses that as the gold standard. And again, we've talked a lot about nationally accredited certifications, and there's several examples up here on the PowerPoint slide. I've given you the website previously, which is on your iCollege, and you can see there's a real short list. I think there's less than a dozen of them that in the health and fitness industry are accepted as nationally accredited. So please always pay attention to that. And if you get what you pay for. Basically, if you're going to pay for any kinds of certifications going forward in your career path, these are the standards. Just make sure that you know which the national accredited is. And obviously, anything that's not on that list, I would highly question before spending your money and investing into that. And same thing, we're looking at this at the lens of if you're the employer, if you're the manager, and you have a possible candidate that comes up and has nationally accredited certifications, then that should be up there pretty strongly with that person's education. Writing out the job description, again, this goes both ways. Did the manager list all these job descriptions and communicate them? And we've seen in, again, for example, your site visits, how that can be frustrating and how that's not always concise. And again, you've seen this on that side of the desk as well, too. If the manager is being a micromanager, if they're not communicating everything appropriately, or, again, just there's so many different scenarios that you can see. But it's important, again, I think a lot of the slides we go through all the time really come down to what I keep saying, communication. I keep harping on that. Communication is just critical, and it's just like in our class. Every week, you're given a weekly email from me just detailing what is expected, what assignments are due, when is the exam, and what have you. And so just please pay attention to that, again, just going forwards. The whole process of how one becomes employed or joins a gym, or in this case, again, a fitness center, you start from, again, just from basically the top down, recruiting a new candidate, screening that candidate, interviewing him or her, contracting with that person, and which means they've been hired, and then there possibly maybe an orientation process. And from there are different advantages and disadvantages. And this slide just lists some of them that are on here in terms of breaking down what type of recruitment sources there are, and you can see in the columns following, well, here are some of the advantages, yet here are some of the disadvantages, right? So again, take a look at the professional referrals. This is a great example there. We talked about how dangerous that may be. The disadvantage in that, well, you pick that person because of such and such, right? But at the same time, it may be an advantage. You might save yourself some time. And some people, by the way, entrust a lot more in a professional referral. So we just have to outweigh that and look at the pros and cons, balance it out, and just see what makes sense. Just continuing on here with more advantages and disadvantages. I think that one we don't see on here, and again is more in current industry trends, is social media. As you know this very well, whenever you're on one of your social media apps, or for example, let's just say LinkedIn, you can't count how many times there is an advertisement for a new job opening, or as a candidate you might see a new job opening that you're interested. If you are a manager or director, that is a terrific way to throw an advertisement out there. And most recently, I've seen others as well that, and again, you probably have as well with the different social media and networking platforms that they have. When there is the process of hiring a candidate, we've talked a lot about the negotiating terms. I always recommend, even if the job says non-negotiable, my philosophy is everything's negotiable. So please make sure to look at everything that makes sense in the entire, what's called total compensation package. Are you happy with the salary? Are you happy with the days off, personal time off? Does the benefits make sense? Ask the questions like, what does the company match in 401k? Is there a Roth IRA available and such? Pre-employment testing, drug screening, background check. We've talked extensively about criminal and abuse with children background, especially any jobs that are involving children. Orientation for new employees as well. A lot of times there is a probationary period. By the way, you have to check the states. In Georgia, which again, does the state have a right to fire, a right to work? Is it that type of legal policy? And what's this again on unemployment insurance benefits? Taking a look at of all that, and I bring that up. I think that's really germane in terms of what's going on as I record this with this COVID-19 phenomenon. We've seen that a big uptick has happened with unemployment percentage and an unprecedented amount of unemployment benefits insurance payouts as, again, I'm recording this right now, and also this 2020 stimulus federal funding package that's going out to everybody in the nation. So, again, a lot of unprecedented things right now, as we can see, but just bringing it back to this PowerPoint slide here in particular, just making sure that all the expectations are met and understood as well. Again, going back to compensation here, every fitness center has to take a look and see what is the, quote, going rate, what is fair and competitive in the industry. So all the time, fitness centers are out there trying to find out, well, what is the average rate that this person should make? Are we on the high end? Should we lowball? And again, it's almost like a dance. We talked about this, again, back to the interviewing resume PowerPoint that we went through earlier on in the semester. It is almost like a ballroom dance, trying to figure out, okay, well, or a chess game of strategy. The old cliche that they're going to try to get me as cheap as they can. I want to get as much money out of them as I can. And where do we meet in the middle? Is it a balancing act in that regard? Forms of compensation, and taking a look at what types of pay. Is there overtime? What are the commission splits? That's a very important one, by the way, for independent contractors. Bonuses and profit sharing. If you climb your way up the ladder and you feel like, hey, I'm going to be a long-term employee, I want to know what's in it for the long-term investment for me. Am I interested in climbing the corporate ladder? Do I want to be a department head, supervisor, or even an executive in this company? And I make it to that point, what types of leverage of negotiation do I have? Are bonuses and profit sharing in there? And continuing on, performance-based. Now, we've talked a lot that in this industry, it is very performance-based because it's so competitive. And so that's all the more reason why the degree is so important, the professional certifications, and building your experience as well. For most of us, we don't have that much experience yet. That's probably the biggest disadvantage we have in trying to get our foot in the door, but don't let that dissuade you, because that's almost refreshing to a lot of employers. They like employees who don't have baggage and don't have to train new people and retrain them the right way. And so if you are newer in the field or you feel like you don't have a lot of experience, that's okay. I wouldn't let that hold you behind and hold that against you. So Benefits, again, ask all of these questions, both ends, trying to figure out, here's another great example, by the way, in your team project. How did we do with this section here when we're talking about staff? For our full-time staff, do we offer these? If so, what percentage is that? Handbooks here, again, these slides are going to repeat in many of the PowerPoints because going back to your team project, this is just bringing it back together and saying, okay, how did this look like? Did we have an employee handbook? Did we have a personnel policy manual? Did we have both? If so, what did they have in it? What is the difference? Well, a lot of larger commercial gyms usually have both, but an employee handbook, as it says, works in most health and fitness facilities. Termination, discipline, rules of conduct. A lot of these we've gone over extensively with mock sessions and, again, case scenarios, and every single one of you always hits this right on the spot. Just always good to start with maybe a verbal warning, maybe communicating. If the infraction has been repetitive or serious, it may result in a written warning or possibly termination. You just have to make those, regulations and try to stay fair and consistent with them. Never forgetting about the Americans with Disabilities Act. Very important. We've gone over different case scenarios, how this almost 100% of the time almost trumps every other type of decision making for any type of dispute or issue or problems. Drug-Free Workplace Act. We're in the health and fitness business, and I would like to hope that this would, as far as staff goes, not be of an issue. I would think that if a research study was done and shown on drugs and alcohol and recreational drugs and such in this industry, I would hope to think that as far as the staff goes would be very, very minimal compared to all the other industries out there. Now, members, well, that's probably a different question. I don't know. Policy against harassment, obviously this just goes without saying. This is very common sense. Again, for example, no such thing as, it was just a joke, or just have a sense of humor. It's always, always, always best to just be very careful and err on the side of being overly cautious. I've given you examples myself, the whole touching, and that's another great one to bring of relevance in current modern society right now with this, quote, social distancing. But anyway, just making sure that all employees, there's no types of misbehavior across the board. So very, very important. But again, that is the end of staff development today. Keep up the great work and continue on. If you have any questions, please email me directly at thoff@gsu.edu. And thank you so much for joining today, and we'll see you on the next session, everybody. Have a great day.